Since Trump scored big with young male voters last election, Democrats are spending $20 million to learn how to speak their language. You heard it, $20 million just to talk to boys. So is this a good idea or a waste of money? What do you think?
Well, I think it's the wrong way to go about the problem, because the Democrats are asking, how do we get male voters? The disillusionment of men is, how do we care better about our men and boys? Like, it should be about how we solve the root problems that drove men and to feel like they had nowhere to go. You don't say, how do we reverse produce it to get a vote? It's a waste of money, and it's a vapid approach at a real problem. Do what Governor Wes Moore is doing right now. He's directing his administration to implement targeted solutions to uplift men and boys. That's going after the statistics. And when he was here on our show, he said, the data speaks for itself. This isn't an opinion. So look at data and solve problems. Don't try to solve elections by reverse producing votes. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, nothing says authenticity like spending $20 million to pay consultants and strategists and focus groups to tell you how to talk to a certain audience. It specifically says to study the syntax, language, and content that gains attention and virality in these male spaces. Like, what made Joe Rogan or Theo Vaughn or some of these manosphere guys huge was there's a level of authenticity. I've listened to a lot of both of them. I don't agree with a lot of what they say, but there's an entertainment value, and there's this is just somebody shooting the you-know-what. It's not this, like, structured, hyper, I have to think about what I'm going to say, I have to consider it 20 different ways, focus group it, and test it. And I think that's where what Democrats are missing is there's, like, some sort of an authenticity problem that they have. But I also would note, Joe Rogan was a Bernie bro. Democrats actually lost Joe Rogan. They had their own Joe Rogan and then alienated him with policies. And the most common things that I hear from men who came around to supporting Trump and maybe were open to other alternatives was they feel like they want to be able to provide for the future and build wealth, and they don't want to be ashamed to say that they want to provide and they want to have money. And then they do see these statistics of how men are falling behind, and they want to be able to highlight it and talk about it, but not be pushed back that you're saying, oh, well, you're excluding girls and women if you want to advance men. And finally, this idea that they feel like even when they're well-intentioned, they're like one misstatement away from getting canceled. Like, I think we need to have a culture that's more forgiving if people are trying their best, if they don't use the right terminology, if they don't use the right phrase. As long as their intention is there, this sort of like crazy cancel culture has really turned young people off.
Look, I don't know that you learn how to talk to men by being in a conference center at a New York hotel, holed up with strategists and experts in suits. I think people need to go into the barrios and the neighborhoods and the barber shops and the places where real people are. And I think one of the problems that the Democrats have, several of them, but one of the things is, like, they keep talking about how weak their brand is and how bad their team is. I never met a man, I never met a woman, I never met a human who wants to join a losing team. So maybe start projecting some, winning attitude, and
but Trump always talks about how everything was terrible, it's bad, and he keeps winning.
I don't think Trump should be the gold standard of what you're looking to do right. I don't think he's in some ways an accident of times and what we've been brought to. He was a perfect storm, because what drove people to this manosphere was people were saying, it's okay to be a man, you have value. I think the language around men with toxic masculinity and things were sometimes misunderstood to make men the problem.
Yeah, but I think one of the things that's going on in the Democratic Party is that there's a lot of divergent voices. Right now, if you look at the Republican Party, there's one voice, right? It's Donald Trump, and everybody else bends the knee to him and basically echoes whatever he says. On the Democratic side, you've got Bernie Sanders on an anti-oligarchy tour. And you've got Elise Sotkin from Michigan saying, don't say the word oligarch. Call them, out-of-touch rich people. You've got AOC talking about Latinx and Latin, and you've got Ruben Gallego, who just got elected to the Senate from Arizona, saying, can we please just call them Latina and Latinos? So I think there's a difference between how the activists talk and how some of the people who've been successful in getting the votes that they lost to Trump, but they got them statewide, talk. And so, to me, speak to the folks.
You want to know what I think? I think it's a waste of money. Maybe these guys should spend their money on teaching men to not be such sexists. Maybe that's it.
But the stats don't bear that out now that
Thank you.
Now that we've seen the election results. Donald Trump performed better than the previous several Republicans with most every people group. He did better with black men, better with Latino men, better with white men and white women. Like, it's just a fact that he has tapped into something. And what I think
But
it
he
is
was
this.
running against a woman, I'm telling you.
But I'm saying that men showed up more for him. Oh, so you think that Democrats who were with Biden in 2020 left to be with Trump because they're sexist?
I don't know the reason, but it's very
Which is
suspicious.
possible. But I'll say this. Donald Trump has made himself the anti-establishment despite being the entire political establishment. And what I used to like about liberals is they were the anti-establishment. You protested
Yes.
Vietnam, you were civil
Everything's
rights.
flip-flop.
Now you guys just defend the status quo, like to death. Like during
Right.
Doge, you're like, don't touch a single federal program. Nobody likes the federal government. No one thinks it works well. No one's like, this is the solution. Let's not try to improve anything. I think there's like more of an imagination and policy issue that Democrats have, to your point. Ask how you can solve people's day-to-day problems
That's
better.
what politicians
Trump's
used to
good at
do.
grievance,
Public
but-
servants find problems, then get solutions.
Well, they
you don't
lost
say,
last
how
year.
do I get you to vote for me by changing how I talk to you? That's treating people like they're stupid.
You know, I never find anything good about the guy, but to his credit, despite the fact that he is an out-of-touch billionaire or somewhat related to a billionaire, he manages to speak in a way
Yeah,
that
that's
relates to people who are not in a gilded,
That's right.
gold lame cage
Right.
on Fifth Avenue or whatever. And I think, to your point, one of the things that Barack Obama did, which I remember being successful, is he had that mentorship program for young men. And so I think it's not just talking the talk or what you think is
Well,
the
he
talk.
knew how to talk to
It's do it.
everybody.
But he also did things for
Yes.
that year.
Well, the Democrats want to do things. They're just not getting it across.